We all know that when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. So I'm going to run through my top 10 deaths from season 4. I'm only including deaths which we actually saw on screen, so no Rast dying by direwolf and no death by giant for Gren. Also, I'm only covering the deaths of named characters. So for example, while the episode 9 death of random wildlings by Scythe, or Big Ass Anchor as I like to call it, was undeniably very cool, it hasn't made it to my list. Just before I kick off, if it's your first time here, I've got exclusive interviews with the Game of Thrones cast, weekly reviews of the latest episodes, and more top GOT lists. So if you haven't already, do subscribe. Okay then, let's count down the top 10 deaths in season 4. It was always going to be a bittersweet moment when red-headed wildling Ygritte saw her former lover Jon Snow again. And so it was when the pair locked eyes as the Battle of Castle Black raged around them. Last time they saw each other was when Ygritte shot Jon in the back, and this time she had her arrow trained on him again as he looked at her fondly, and she struggled to reconcile her love for him with her allegiance to the wildlings. But the decision was taken out of her hands when orphaned potato boy Ollie raised his own arrow and shot Ygritte from behind right through the heart, just as our favourite wildling had shot Ollie's dad in the back of the head when the wildlings raided their village in episode 3. As she died in Jon's arms, she wished they'd stayed in the cave and said one last time, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." If you still miss Ygritte, check out this video to see the cast of Game of Thrones and fans do their best impressions of her classic line. Jon Snow was really up against it in the Battle of Castle Black when he came face to face with the insanely strong Tower of a Man, Styr, the Magna of Thenn. Styr used his battle axe to knock Jon's sword out of his hands before Jon got his hands on a chain and used it to wrangle Styr's battle axe off him. Then the pair went mano a mano with Jon getting smashed against an anvil. But as Styr looked set to go in for the kill, Jon proved he'd learned a thing or two from Karl Tanner about not always fighting honourably. Yes, just as Karl did to him at Craster's Keep, Jon spat in Styr's face and used the distraction to grab a hefty hammer, which he smashed into Styr's bald head. No more roast crow for you, Mr. Thenn. Episode 5 saw Locke, the man who lopped off Jaime Lannister's hand, rock up at Craster's Keep with Jon Snow and a bunch of Night's Watchmen to take down Karl Tanner and the other rebellious former Rangers holed up there. But unbeknown to our men in black, Locke was actually only there to accomplish his mission of hunting down Bran and Rickon Stark for Roose Bolton. And when he found Bran and his friends in a hut outside Craster's Keep, Locke showed he's still got a bit of a thing about limbs as he cut Bran's leg to check he really was the paralysed Stark boy. But as Locke carted the young Stark off, Bran warged into Hodor, turning him into Wargdor, or should that be Brandor? Anyway, he was basically a not-so-gentle giant who went all Incredible Hulk on Locke's ass, snapping the House Bolton man's neck. Let that be a lesson to anyone who calls Hodor an idiot. You can watch my interviews with actor Noah Taylor, who played Locke, and Christian Nern, who plays Hodor, right here. He may have killed creepy Craster, but rebellious Ranger Karl Tanner certainly kept the eep in Craster's Keep, violating the dead wildling's daughter wives and sending what he thought was his last son to the White Walkers. So despite being a fucking legend in his own mind, it was always quite clear that Karl was not long for this Game of Thrones world. Still, he went out fighting, even if he did use some dirty tactics, and almost proved Oberyn Martell's wise words that long swords are a bad option in close quarters. In fact, it was only thanks to one of Craster's women stabbing Karl in the back that Jon was able to get back on his feet after being tripped up by Karl and run his sword through the back of Karl's head and right out of his mouth. A fitting end for the man who drank wine from the skull of Lord Commander Mormont, and an end which incidentally mirrored the way Podrick saved Tyrion at Blackwater. Remember Polliver? Yeah, that's right, the Lannister man who stole Arya's sword Needle and used it to murder Lommy Greenhands, the young kid travelling north on the King's Road with Arya, Gendry, Hot Pie and Yoren. Well, they say that revenge is a dish best served cold, and Arya finally got hers when she came across Polliver at the inn at the crossroads, took back Needle and stuck him with the pointy end, polishing him off by running the sword right through his throat. This death scene proved a satisfying payback for Polliver's actions in season 2 and a strong end to the opening episode of season 4. Melisandre was certainly right when she foresaw darkness in Arya towards the end of season 2. By the way, you can check out my latest interview with Maisie Williams, who plays Arya, here. If anyone had actually dared ask Tywin Lannister how he'd like to exit the world of Westeros, you can be pretty sure he would not have said sitting on the toilet in a brief break from sex with a prostitute. But ultimately, even the all-powerful Papa Lannister didn't always get what he wanted. So Tywin's letter-writing days are brought to an end by a crossbow on the crapper. And as if that wasn't enough insult added to injury, the King's Hand died at the hands of his own son Tyrion. Still, it was quite something seeing Tywin do his very best to maintain the upper hand in his conversation with Tyrion, in spite of his, somewhat delicate position. And contrary to popular belief about the Lannisters' incredible wealth, Tywin did not, in the end, shit gold. Still, now the Lannister legacy can boast both a king slayer and a kin slayer. Go Lions! To see where Daddy Lannister's death ranks in Tywin's top 10 on-screen moments, check out my countdown here. Season 4 of Game of Thrones reminded us that if you fancy living a long life, it's probably best not to RSVP to any wedding invitations, especially if you're the one due to get hitched. Yes, the Lannisters' motto may be "Hear me roar," but it was more a case of "Hear me croak" in episode 2 as young King Joffrey drew his last breath after scoffing some particularly dry pigeon pie and washing that down with some poisoned wine. Thanks to Cersei, all eyes in King's Landing were on Tyrion as a culprit, but in reality it was Littlefinger and Olenna Tyrell, helped by Dontos and an unwitting Sansa. There's no doubt that Joffrey was a thorn in everyone's side except his adoring mother's since the start of the show, and he was malicious to the very last, with jibes at everyone in his firing line, including Sansa and Tyrion. Yet he was such a fantastic character, played so brilliantly by Jack Gleeson, and we did love to hate Joffrey so much that it was almost a shame to see him finally felled. By the way, you can check out what the Game of Thrones cast had to say about Joffrey and actor Jack Gleeson in this video. No matter how crazy you think your relatives are, they've probably got nothing on Lysa Arryn. Why? Because this is a woman best known for threatening to throw Tyrion out of the Moondoor for murdering her husband Jon Arryn, despite having poisoned him herself, almost breaking her niece Sansa's fingers as she interrogated her about sleeping with Littlefinger, ear-piercingly noisy sex with her new husband Peter Baelish, and, oh yeah, breastfeeding her fully grown son, Robin. Anyway, Mrs. Littlefinger was very obviously cruising for a bruising, as we know only too well that Littlefinger does not like leaving people alive who can reveal his secrets, as Ross and Dontos discovered the hard way. So when Lysa threatened to toss Sansa out of the Moondoor after catching her kissing Littlefinger, it gave him the perfect opportunity to create some more chaos by giving his new wife a push. But Baelish isn't the sort of man who'd just casually chuck you out of the Moondoor without a wily word or two on the matter. No, he's the kind of guy who likes to give you something to think about as you're hurtling through the air to certain death. And so it was with Lysa, whose face was an absolute picture of love, as Littlefinger told her he'd only ever loved one woman. But that look on Lysa's face soon changed to one of horror, as he revealed he actually meant her sister Catelyn. It was a surprise for book readers and non-book readers when Jojen met his grabby, stabby, icy, fiery end in the season 4 finale. The Bran clan were on their way to meet the three-eyed raven when they were attacked by an army of skeleton wights who emerged mysteriously from beneath the snow. Jojen's sister Mira tried to fight off the gruesome creatures, as did Hodor, who Bran walked into, but as a sickly Jojen lay on the ground, a headless wight stabbed him repeatedly in the stomach. Mira lopped off its arm, but the damage was already done and there was nothing to do but put her brother out of his misery with a quick cut to the throat. And as you can never be dead enough in the Game of Thrones world, The female child of the forest firebombed Jojen to smithereens, ensuring he couldn't be reanimated. I love the drama of this scene, including the White's hands suddenly reaching up out of the snow. It was brilliantly like Ray Harryhausen meets Michael Jackson's Thriller video. When Bronn decided not to champion Tyrion in his trial by combat and instead chose social climbing over what was basically a suicide mission, Dornish man of the moment Oberyn Martell stood up and volunteered his services. Of course, there was a little more to it than that, as Oberyn was desperate for the chance to kill his sister Elya's murderer, Gregor Clegane, and drag a confession out of him before he died. Well, that didn't all exactly go to plan. He did get the confession, but only as he was being given a mind-blowing headache and having his eyes gouged out by the mountain. Nice. I don't think there's any question that this was the most horrifying death of season 4 in terms of the way it was executed and how we felt about Oberyn and Gregor. So what do you think were the best deaths in season 4 of Game of Thrones? Let me know in the comments below. Honourable mentions go to Shae, Pip, Dontos Hollard and the Meereenese champion dispatched by Daario Naharis. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more top 10s coming up, as well as season 5 episode reviews and exclusive cast interviews. And remember, if you're not watching Jan G on GOT, you know nothing.